My name is Matthias Ammann. I'm a psychotherapist, and today I would like to talk a little bit about how psychoanalysis can help us to bear the thought of climate change. Hope you enjoy it. To start, every day more and more scientific evidence shows us that, first, climate change is a scientifically proven reality. Second, human behavior is responsible for the vast majority of it. And third, we have to drastically change our way of interacting with nature to secure our survival as a species. Evidence is all around us, although many of us are still reluctant to deal with this problem. Understanding the actual environment crisis without understanding how the human psyche deals with painful ideas is a mistake. One way of looking at the problem is by focusing on the human rational evaluation and decision-making/actions, a perspective many times adopted by political scientists, communication experts, economists, and some psychology experts from the cognitive and behavior areas. Certainly, all areas have much to contribute, and different epistemic approaches are crucial to address the current environment crisis, which can be seen as a hyperobject, an entity of such vast temporal and spatial dimension that defeats the traditional ideas about what a thing is in the first place. But surprisingly, the psychoanalytical field and its abundant theoretical, clinical, and conceptual resources are underrepresented. The present presentation aims to summarize some central ideas in the psychoanalytical theory, putting them in the context of environment changes, and then emphasizing the importance of good relations for comprehending the environment reality, a comprehension that needs to integrate the thought of our dependency on the natural world and also our profound impact on it. Talking a little bit about psychoanalysis, it is always important to remember that according to psychoanalysis, we are not a revealed, unitary, rational, and self-aware entity. Rather, we are complex and dynamic parts with which most of the time conflict with each other. In Freud's work, we can find successively words as conflict, ambivalence, opposition, ambiguity, contradiction, partial tendency, deformation, etc. And all these words try to better portray the enigma between desire, censorship, pleasure, culture, pleasure, reality, ego, id, superego, ego, erotic and autoconservation drives, eros, thanatos, manifest and latent dream content, and finally, conscious and unconscious. Realizing that we are not one homogeneous unit and that many times we are not in control is what Freud called the third blow on the human narcissism. The first was done by Copernicus, showing we are not the center of the universe. Then Darwin, showing we are not different from other animals. And finally, the psychological blow, showing we are not even sovereign in our own minds. We could argue a fourth blow, realizing we are totally dependent on the environment we live in. Our psychic mind has many partial instincts, drives, needs, and desires. Some of them are conscious or known, bewusst in German, and some unconscious, less known or totally unknown, unbewusst. This partial tendency carry conscious and or unconscious qualities, and depending on the topologic, dynamic, and economic arrangement, there is more or less gray, but never just black or white. Despite our rational desire to organize, categorize, and control life in binary boxes, there is usually complex and contradictory internal relations, some more evident and others less. So based on this psychoanalysis, all of us have a concerned, grateful, and reality-loving part through the environment care's relations, built through the environment care relations. But also we have a narcissistic, sensitive, and fragile part, which tend to flee from reality using omnipotent thinking to avoid unbearable pain. The first, A, loves reality and readily accepts complex notion of proportionality and causality, which might come from science, sensorial experience, and other forms of cultural interactions. This part is built continuously in emotional and meaningful relations and creates an expansive and curious position towards complex, different, and even difficult realities. The second part, the narcissistic, still overwhelmed by helpless and aloneness, creates magical solutions, sustaining grandiose and delusional stage which deny substantial parts of reality and prevents the person or even the community to take responsibility for its present and past actions. Once recognizing them would imply being able to feel guilt, shame, and loss. If we accept the interdependency as the core of the ecological principle, that is, that we are part of a big interdependent living system and add up our past and current destructive impact, which is producing an environmental hyper-object that overwhelms us and it endangers our survival, an avalanche of extreme feelings comes up. Loss, anger, guilt, shame, and fear are some of these feelings, and being able to contain, digest, and transform them into something meaningful, it's not easy. Recognizing that a big part of our Western identity is based on exploitive economy and that we are responsible for destructing the environment we love and depend on is a difficult task. And even if our narcissistic parts deny that we are another being in a closed system called Earth, and we depend directly on this ecosystem, another part understands the dimension of the destruction which leads to more anxiety. Unfortunately, it is also true that the bigger the anxiety, the more primitive and far from reality defenses we tend to use. Omnipotent thinking, projection, and denial are a few ways to diminish and eliminate the anxiety that comes from reality. Omnipotent thinking usually tries to create a magical solution. Nowadays, I would say that the idea about technology is omnipotent thinking. Thinking that technology will save us is a way of creating an omnipotent thought. Projections try to put the problem away. Maybe the North American, the Chinese, oil industry, all of it is in a way true, but sometimes it puts away our share of the responsibility. And the third and most critical, it's denial. It's probably one of the most complex ways of dealing with it. In denial, we have negation, which is usually the first step of mourning. That is, once we have a shocking loss, negate it might be a transitory phase to later gradually feel anger and the pain, of the loss and being able to grieve. But far more complex than negation is disavowal. Disavowal, it's a radical excision of reality. Different from the first one, negation, disavowal might belong to a more organized and enduring defensive structure. On this point, it seems that psychoanalysis has a central contribution. Besides the efforts of communication experts to give more, better, and more tailored information, we need to create social spaces/bounds able to support the vulnerable parts of ourselves in the context of the painful idea of climate change. Admitting and sheltering these helpless parts, which are usually hidden under narcissistic, magnificent, and magical solution or blasé face of indifference, needs social support. If there is not enough individual and collective support, it's more likely that the person can jump back to radical forms of disavowal. But it is very difficult to do it alone. And an intimate, safe, and honest relation with others, that can be an analyst, a counselor, a friend, a group of people, is the only way to undo a fragile individuation, being contained by a reliable environment and placing the difficult emotion in scene and gradually with support, giving meaning to it, and perhaps after a while being able to express concern and the need to repair the current and past destruction. A place that inevitably alternates paranoid, schizoid, and depressive positions, and especially capacitates to sustain the last one. The depressive position is a privileged position in which we realize our love and pain of losing, and potency and destructiveness, a paradoxical position that many times people try to avoid, but which is central to existence and to the ability to think. In a way, consolidating a thought is only possible in a depressive position. Dark optimism is an expression coined by Sound Chamberlain. It summarized the need to face dark truth while believing firmly in the human potential, a potential that necessarily is around the loving parts and needs to be increased and sophisticated in collective relations. Potential that contain and be contained. Potential to contain and to be contained, to create and to be created. Thinking about painful ideas alone easily can bring up narcissistic and magical solutions to avoid reality or push people into a melancholic and helpless position. In intimate, generous, and meaningful relations, we expand vastly our capacity to face difficult realities, support them in our minds, and gradually think about them. An approach especially needed when we are facing a hyper object that outrages every singular attempt to address it. Creating support structures for dealing with the consecutive and continuous losses is central for this task. One-to-one psychotherapy sessions, group sessions, gatherings, talks, etc. are ways people might have a chance to express and fully recognize their emotions regarding the subject. In climate change, people usually split the present losses and project them into the future, making it catastrophic and unmanageable. But many losses are happening now, and many more will happen if we do not start seriously addressing the problem. And besides mourning our impact on the environment, we also have to mourn or deal with the complex and ambivalent feeling of our way of life, having cars, traveling, eating meat, etc., and all its reminiscences that are strongly entangled with our identity, but that might show themselves more or less incompatible with a sustainable future. Recognizing losses and mourning is always a process, and it takes time. It is impossible to realize and mourn the implication of climate change at once. But with a few steps, we can make it easier. The first one, we must start telling the truth. Avoiding the truth or hiding the problem only amplifies the amount of anxiety. Second, we have to choose leaders that recognize the problem, leaders that are not afraid to tell the truth to the public or deal with painful and unappealing realities. Third, creating support structures based on careful listening and acceptance, avoiding moralistic and judging readings. And fourth, stimulating a culture of conviviality. Our society has created an individualistic and isolated existence that contacts itself mainly in the competitive space of the market. Although the capacity to live together and rely on each other, despite the protest of our narcissistic parts, might be a good way to feel again a sense of belonging and using the full human potential of cooperation and thinking together. To conclude, loss is painful and we need to detach ourselves piece by piece from what is past and gone, or from that which is no longer sustainable. We need to grieve with the full range of emotion which that implies. Only then will we become able to remake our future using all of our creativity, reason, feeling, and strength. In addition, more than dealing with the loss and its painful ideas, we also have to rediscover or create the joy in the encounter with the other and with nature. Here, if you like the subject and the topic, are some books which are very good for further researchers. These books have a lot of idea about climate change, ecology, and psychoanalysis. I strongly recommend them. And to finalize, I'm really happy to help you if you like think together about this subject, and thank you very much for your attention. Bye bye.